2012. We'll be doing this every 6 months or so. We have 60 minutes for today's session, 40 minutes to present, and the last 20 minutes for any open Q&A. But if you want me to repeat something or clarify something, or you have a specific question you want to ask, please raise your hand on the webinar toolbar, and Agustina will try to stop me and ask the questions right there. Lastly, this data is Perseus imprint data, so it is proprietary. Please don't share with anybody outside your company or client publisher. Here's a brief snapshot of what we'll discuss today, sort of the here's what I'm about to tell you slide. We'll look at the sales of digital reading devices and how they're forecasted to triple in 2011, particularly with the new Kindle due out in a few weeks. You'll see our amazingly consistent quarter-by-quarter ebook sales growth and the potential trends that are leading us to estimate, admittedly on the high side, that ebooks could be as much as 30% of our overall net sales by this time next year. That's up from 12% where we are today. Ebook pricing promotions are in the news and affecting publishers' both top and bottom line sales growth at Amazon, and as well as at other retailers, and we'll see the results of that promotion. There are a lot, but there will be lots of questions we need to ask ourselves as publishers as to how we should proceed. Ebook growth is affecting the rest of the sales channels as well. And finally, international seems to be perhaps the channel with the biggest upside for incremental growth, given the limited ebook availability in those markets. So jumping into it, we see the continued sales of digital reading devices as one of the key drivers of ebook sales growth. More people buying devices, more consumers of ebooks. And the numbers appear to be just astounding. Sales of digital reading devices, DRDs, are poised to basically triple in 2011, by the year-end 2011, to as much as 39 million devices out there life to date. This stacked bar chart you see here that we looked at from 2009, 2010, and forecasting out for 2011, you can see the growth rate there. You can see from 2011 to 10, it grew by about 3x, a little bit over 3x. And that from 10 to 11, it grew just under 3x, at 2.5x. And we're expecting to see a huge uptick in Kindle sales, as we talked about in November. That's the light blue. Started at 2.2 million, grew to around 9 million by 2010. And people are forecasting that by year-end 11, could be as much as 21 million Kindles out there in the world. The red you see here, the red is referring to BNN, was around 500,000 by 10, grew to almost 4 million, or forecasted to grow to almost 4 million by 2011. And then the light green here, that's everybody else. That's Sony, that's the Kobo. Those are all the other devices that are out there in the world. Projected to grow to about 5 million. A large number of that is actually the tablets. I'll talk about that in a second. Then, of course, our friends at Apple. Apple's forecasting, they had about 2.4 million digital reading devices and about 9 million forecasted by year-end 11. Now, caveat there is, of course, tablet numbers, we're finding that only a small percentage of tablet owners are actually using them as a digital reading device. Apple, as I'm sure you've heard, they've already sold 25 million through first half of 2011, and they're forecasted to sell another 20 million to 45 million by the year end. So that means of the 45 million, we're really only counting about 9.4 million of that number to try to capture the digital reading device universe. So what's also curious is that while Apple's DRD market share seems high, the actual sales volume, the ebook sales volume, is pretty light in comparison. Right now, they're around 10 to 12% market share of our ebook sales today. BNN, even though their numbers are pale in comparison as far as number of devices out there, are still solidly in second place at around 15 to 16 to 17% of market share. The rest, of course, being mostly our friends in Seattle. So, like any business, there's a lot of noise in the ebook sales month to month. But looking at the growth quarter to quarter, we see a pretty clear pattern going straight up. And a pattern that seems to be repeating over and over again. So what we have here, particularly called out right here at the top left. We have quarter by quarter, period by period. So if you look at the first half 11, grew roughly 2.9x over the first half of 2010. First half of 2010 grew about 3.8x over the first half of 9. Each quarter seems to be growing around 3x over that same period last year. So with that trend in mind, we extrapolated that pattern out 4 quarters. That's the bar graph portion you see in white with the dashed lines over here on the right. And if that pattern does continue, we're forecasting that over 30% of our net sales for by Q2 2012 could be from ebooks. That's up from 12% now. But it's unclear if the drivers that fuel that growth will continue, particularly DRD sales and backlist releases. So DRD sales, as we just talked about in the last slide, will that hockey stick, that growth rate going up, will that continue at such a, at such an exponential clip? That's unclear. Same sort of question for backlist releases. So to date, we've been able to artificially grow ebook sales with titles that we've always had on our backlist, but then over time we've been releasing them as ebooks. We believe that we're kind of coming to the end of that now, that we have released all the regular trade editions that we're going to release as an ebook, and that we're left with basically all the new releases that we've been releasing as a normal publisher would in both P and E, and then all the other difficult, complicated conversions, the 4 colors, the photography books, things of that nature. So as far as the backlist releases, I think we're kind of done there. The DRDs, still entirely unclear. What's also interesting is that while we're showing around 12% of our sales today to be from ebooks, looking at our competitors, they're around that range, if not a little bit higher. HarperCollins just announced 12% of their sales coming from ebooks. Hachette just announced 20%. Random House is at 20%. Simon & Schuster 14%. Penguin announced 14% recently. We attribute their numbers to be slightly larger than our own, primarily due to fiction sales. They have a stronger fiction line than we do. And in prior studies, and in this current study, we've seen that fiction sales to have a sizable percentage in ebook. So while the growth for ebooks is across the board, it does differ category by category, and we were curious to see how it varied, particularly in relation to what we saw for year-end 2010. To remember from last time, this comparison is showing the percentage of ebook sales against the total ebook plus P-book sales, where we have the same title set in E and P. Now that's wildly confusing. Let me just take a step back and explain what that means. So for example, if Harry Potter sold 250 ebook units and 750 P-book units over the course of a year for a total of 1,000, that means Harry Potter has roughly 25% of their sales as electronic. So here we aggregate that percentage across a multitude of titles and pivot that data by category. And so here within this chart, you can see the light purple line here is referencing the year-end 10 numbers that we saw category by category. So here you saw Health, Mind, and Body, where year-end 10 had an ebook percentage of roughly, call it 7%. And then we also looked at, of course, the first half of 11, and then we also saw the overall number for this entire subset, where we had both P and E in the same title set, the overall percentage for year-end 10, this light red dash, and then for the first half 11, the solid red dash. And you can see category by category, the percentages were always up from year-end 10 in first half 11, and in most cases they actually doubled. And if you were to look at overall, we're at 22%, which is double the 11% we were by year-end 2010. Now, that's particularly interesting, and you can see category by category, they're up, and of course fiction is by far the largest player at roughly 39% for the first half of 11, and we see that number continuing to grow. We see all these numbers continuing to grow. Now, again, this is using the same title set in both E and P. Remember, our overall ebook percentage is at 12%. So it's not every title. If we had every title in ebook, all the 4 colors, all the photography books, all the other difficult conversions, And if we had every title in ebook performing the same way, our overall number would probably be closer to that 22% we're seeing here. Like the categories, we wanted to see how ebooks stacked up as we looked down our titles, sorted by sales volume. Again, this is that same list, the same title set we were looking at in regards to the categories. We had both E and P in the same title set. So we sorted the titles in descending order sales and broke them up into quarters, the top 25%, the upper 25%, so on and so forth, and compared the trend to the first half 11 versus year-end 2010. So for example, in the top 25%, by year-end 10, we saw about 10% of those sales. These are obviously our best-selling titles. We saw about 10% of those sales coming from ebooks. For the first half 11, it doubled to 20%. What's also interesting is that if you look at the bottom half of this list, pretty much the bottom 50%, you can see a very sizable percentage, around 40% of those sales are coming from ebooks. Lesson here is that even that those deep backlist titles, the ones that are most often overlooked, could see the biggest possible uptick if we converted them into ebooks. So we've always been very curious to see how Amazon's pricing our P-book and ebooks. So we tend to run a web crawl program through their website from time to time, looking for patterns in their discounts. So to read this chart, let's just look at the top left corner table right there. It's the hardcover P-books. We took 3 snapshots in time, August 2011, February 2011, and 2010. We looked at their list price, the average list price, the average consumer price, and that calculated average discount. And up until this most recent survey, we've always seen that number go up, or maybe flat, but it has always gone up in some degree. For the first time ever, we're starting to see those numbers come down. You can see here, 2%. The discount for the hardcover P-books fell from 37% to 35%, down 2 points. For hardcover ebooks, and again, these are books that the print version of that book is currently in hardcover, so we're calling it a hardcover ebook. That discount has basically stayed flat at 53%. For trade paperback P-books, down 5 points. For trade paper ebooks, basically down flat a little bit, down 1%. Again, every time we've ever run this program through Amazon, those discounts have always gone up since the last time we've done this survey. And so the conclusion we're drawing here is that Amazon has started to slow down on heavily discounting all titles, if not reverse course. And we're starting to see them aggressively discount on certain ebook titles. So 2011, it looks like it's starting to shape up as the year of the pricing promotions. Amazon, more so than other retailers, has started to aggressively downprice ebook titles in an effort to draw in consumers as well as steal some market share that had been ebbing away over the course of the year. They had close to 90%, maybe even close to 100% market share a couple of years ago, and now that number is probably in the high 70s as B&N and Apple have started to steal market share. We started to gather Amazon's pricing data over the last year, evidenced by what we were just looking at before. So we started looking at their everyday pricing and their promotional pricing schemes. Now there's a difference there. Promotional pricing and everyday discount pricing is funded by the account. That's Amazon's usual 40% off, New York Times bestsellers, things like that. While promotional pricing, that's something that is funded by the publisher, where we offer to pay the difference between selling it at $25 all the way down to X being $5, even in some cases $2.99. And usually the promotional pricing is deeper than the everyday. So instead of the discount being 30, 20, or 40% off, it could be as much as 80 or 90% off. So these promotional pricing schemes, even though they may be successful, they require closer inspection. We need to ask ourselves as publishers, how do we choose the titles that participate? What's the impact on the titles outside of the program? Do we offer up deep backlist titles in a series to spark sales of the new titles? Are we training the consumer to expect the low price? This is an important question we need to ask ourselves, because Amazon has already got them thinking that the max ebook price is $9.95. If we start aggressively discounting, aggressively pricing down to $1, $2, $3, Are consumers going to start expecting books to be $3 or even $9.95 for that matter? And lastly, when should we offer the price point? This is sort of akin to the windowing release ebook concept, where publishers have asked themselves whether to hold ebook releases until the P-book had been on sale for a few months. Do we offer pricing at different points in time? Do we wait until it's a backlist title? Do we wait until the book's been on sale for a few months? Things like that. So here are results from Amazon's Sunshine Program. So the Sunshine Program, just to explain, take a step back, Amazon asked publishers in June and July, and I believe they tried it again in August and September, to run a Sunshine Program with the idea being to draw in sunlight on specific titles that the publisher would fund. That Amazon, of course, would ultimately select, but that the publisher would fund. And so these were titles that were offered in a discount for a short window of time, and they priced them all the way down to $2.99 or less. And we totaled up the sales over 3 periods: the average month prior to the program, the month in the program, and then the month after the program, to see if the attention, the sunshine, had an afterglow effect. And then we compared the sales for the month in the program and the month after the program to the month prior. The idea being to see if of course, the program had an effect on sales, and undoubtedly it did, and whether or not it had an effect on sales after the program, when the pricing went away. And in fact, it had an effect there as well. So just looking at the top 25%, just to explain this table. So they sold 12,000 copies for the 77 titles that we had in the program. They sold 12,000 copies in the average month prior to the Sunshine Program. They sold 74,000 copies in the month in the program, and then they sold about 17,000 copies in the month after the program. So from a variance percentage standpoint, there was an increase of 514% for the month in the program compared to the month prior, and a 38% increase in the month after the program. Overall, we saw a 7x increase, this is the bottom line, a 7x increase during the program, the month in the program, and a 46, almost 50% increase in the month after the program. What's particularly interesting is that if you look at the bottom 75% of titles, these are titles that obviously, if you see, even if you added up the total altogether amongst these 3 levels, and of course we broke it up into quarters similar to that sales concentration page we were looking at before. If you look at the bottom 75% of titles, they barely even sold 1,000 copies between all of them. That's about probably 50 titles between all of them in the average month prior to the program. And then you add up the month after, and it's almost 2,000. So that's particularly interesting. And in the month of the program, that bottom 75% grew 20x in the month in the program compared to the month prior, and almost 3 times in the month after the program. Now, Amazon, of course, is getting the market share benefit because we're certainly seeing this have an effect at other places. And it's also largely driven by Amazon using their merchandising abilities to drive traffic to these titles. They have lots of levers, lots of ways to drive eyeballs to certain titles. And they used every lever they possibly could because they see this as a huge benefit to their consumers, as well as a way to steal market share back from B&N and Apple and others. So we're concluding that pricing promotions without the promotion wouldn't have the same effect, particularly if we were to do this on our own. Now remember, there are the pricing promotions that just ran, these Sunshine programs. These are promotions that the publisher paid for, not Amazon. We also wondered what the effect of this program had on the rest of the titles not in the program, and found the following. So this chart's looking at Amazon's top 100 ebook bestseller lists and grouped the number of titles on that list into 4 groups based on their price point. So here you can see the red is referencing books that were priced $10 or more. The blue are books that were priced $0 to $2.99. The yellow, books that were priced $8 to $9.99. And the pink, purple are books that were priced $3 to $7.99. And what we're saying here is that for each plot point, these are the number of titles that had a price of $10 or greater on that day that were in the top 100. So on July 9th, there were roughly 39 titles that were in the top 100 bestseller list, ebook bestseller list, that had a price point of $10 or greater. So during the program, you can see it started here on July 18th and ended on July 29th, about 11 days, 10 or 11 days. And over that period of time, you can see that the titles that were priced $10 or greater, what we're calling full-priced ebooks, were essentially replaced by the books that were in the program, the books that were priced between $0 and $2.99. Now, what's also very interesting is that these books here, the books that were priced between $3 and $9.99, basically flat, remained essentially unaffected by the Sunshine Program. So it means a couple things. A, obviously this is a very price-conscious market. And B, that if you were going to make a splash, if you wanted to drive traffic, a price of $5.99, $7.99 isn't necessarily going to drive traffic to that book. A price of $1.99, $2.99 will drive traffic. But, of course, you'll have to have promotion alongside it, and you'll have to expect sales to be great enough to withstand the P&L hit that we would take. Now, taking a step back and looking at the larger picture, we wanted to see how the impact of this growth for ebooks as well as Amazon is reverberating across the other sales channels. So here we looked at all the various sales channels, the net sales, the percentage of our net sales channel by channel over a course of time from 2008 all the way to the first half 11. And here in the light blue, that's national accounts, excluding Amazon. That's CNN. That's still within existing, albeit weakened BGI, Ingram, Baker & Taylor, Hastings, places like that. Our ID wholesalers, the mass merch accounts. International and Canada, they basically remain flat over time. Other channels, that's field, special and gift, and the rest of accounts. Then we broke out Amazon because they're such a growing player, and of course our friends known as ebooks. So the biggest gain, of course, were ebooks, grew from basically nothing in 08 all the way up to 12% in the first half 11. Amazon also grew 5 points in that same period. And meanwhile, national accounts fell from 50% all the way down to 34% in that same time period. 16 points all the way down to 34. Now, ebooks and Amazon, if we were to combine them into a quote-unquote online channel, they would have roughly 27% of our market share as of the first half of 11. And they are obviously our fastest growing channel, and within a couple months, certainly within a year, they would be our largest channel if one were to combine them as such. In Amazon, if you were to combine our P and ebook sales, Amazon is by far now our largest retailer. That may have been the case for several of our client publishers out there, but for PBG, that switch at first place, that just happened in the last 6 months or so. Now, as ebooks go global, ebooks, of course, started as a domestic phenomenon, but ebooks have started to go global, and is a growing component within the continued strength of those ebook numbers. We looked at the percentage of our ebook sales that come from international accounts over time, from Q2 2010 all the way through Q2 11, and it bounced around a little in 2010. These are showing the percentages of international ebook sales as a percentage of our overall ebook sales. So by Q2 2010, they were at 5% of our overall ebook sales. By the first half of 11, they were 12% of our ebook sales. And what's also interesting is that international P-books are now roughly 10% of our overall P-book sales. So ebooks at international, they're now outpacing the domestic sales. Or they're now outpacing the P-book sales. We believe that due to limited availability of the P-books in international, we feel the opportunity for incremental growth for ebooks in that market is greater than perhaps anywhere else. And here with some of our current international ebook accounts, and then some of the new international ebook accounts to come. Now, as we approach the 4th anniversary of the modern ebook, in fact, Kindle's release date is probably almost exactly to the day the 4th anniversary of the first Kindle that was launched in November 2007. There's still a significant number of wildcards that could radically alter our industry. Lawsuits against the agency plan have started to proliferate. There are a number of states that are battling that right now. Amazon continues to move aggressively, no surprise there. And they continue to sell large quantities at deeply discounted prices. As I've said a few times, they've recently announced the launch of their new Kindles. Kirschbaum just opened an imprint from Amazon. They're officially a publisher. They just signed Tim Ferriss to it. Well, not just, that was a few months ago. Signed Tim Ferriss to a new deal. The iPad continues to sell strongly. Google absolutely feels like a sleeping giant. They could wake up at any moment. The GBS settlement still to be determined. And the pending purchase of Motorola signals that they absolutely are going to be a bigger player in this space. And then there are multiple revenue models that are still out there that we've yet to tap into. Subscription sales, flash sales, things like that could monetize ebook sales in different ways, new and interesting ways. And then lastly, of course, physical retailers. They face an increasingly difficult economic model. What exactly is going to happen to them as more consumers start buying more books digitally? And then lastly, some to-dos for publishers for the rest of 2011. If you haven't, please, by all means, start converting your files into ebooks. Also, can't discount the more complicated conversions. I would highly recommend start looking at those as well. Start converting your entire backlist, because your backlist is becoming even more important for continued growth in this channel. In the past, Amazon and others have tried to pay attention to the books that had what they call demand-weighted coverage. It seems that the opposite could be true as well. Don't forget about international, as we just talked about. It's potentially the greatest incremental growth that we have amongst all the various channels. And then decisions about everyday ebook prices and pricing promotions significantly more complicated than what they have been in the past. And that is the end of our presentation, and we open the floor for Q&A. Agostina?
Yes, great. Thanks, Greg.
Sure.
I'm going to unmute your phone line now, so feel free to ask a question. You can also raise your hand or submit it in writing. If you have not entered your audio pin, I encourage you to submit your questions in writing because you won't be able to speak. So with that preamble, are there any questions?
Yes.
Hi.
What about agreements with authors on royalties? Any standard agreements?
I'm sorry. In relation to royalties?
In relation to royalties on ebooks.
So I'm sorry. What's your question exactly?
The question is, are there standards that are emerging?
Okay.
With royalty rates.
That's an excellent question, and that is something that is probably best answered by our business office. The standards are proliferating in the sense that there are many standards. Agents, of course, have their own version of a standard. Publishers are starting to formulate their own version as well. I think 25% of net sales is one popular standard, but I honestly can't answer that. I could put together a quick little white paper on that for this group and send it out if you'd want, but it's not something that we can generally answer right here. Great question, though.
Great. Are there any other questions for Greg?
I have a question. I'm not sure whether you're prepared to answer it. A lot of smaller websites that sell ebooks now and would like to expand their selection of ebooks approach Constellation, and they're turned down because they're deemed too small. There's a lot of niche sales potential here, and as you know, online sales have always been niche markets, and niche markets do really well. So there's this enormous potential that's going untapped, where you know, these aren't fly-by-night organizations. They're just small and niche-oriented, they're approaching Ingram, which is a workaround, right? Because you sell to Ingram, Ingram could sell to them the same way we do physical books, but Ingram has a $10,000 entry fee for them. They have to pay $10,000 up front to get set up, you know, to sell the books off the Ingram server. So that's not really a very likely solution for companies that are, you know, say $1 million a year in sales or less. So what's Constellation going to do to reach this market?
Okay, great question. So we, of course, we have partnerships with several wholesalers, ebook wholesalers. Overdrive is another one. And I am not sure what fee structure they have there as well. But there's a reason why Ingram does charge the $10,000. We don't charge that kind of fee, of course. But there's a reason why Ingram does charge that kind of fee, because it is massively expensive and time-consuming to set up individual retailers. Versus, you know, where Ingram is on the P-book side is actively searching new accounts, and of course they do not charge a fee to set them up on the P-book side. On the e-book side, it is a massive undertaking to set up new retailers. Now that said, we set up new retailers all the time. We actually have multitudes of what we call waves. So we set up new retailers with every new wave. We try to set it up in relation to like an airport runway. And so an airport can only handle so much traffic in a given time. And so as we were just pointing out a couple slides back, we're looking at new international retailers that we're trying to fit into all these different waves, as that's a growing and burgeoning market. We never intend to turn away completely smaller niche retailers, but there is only so much work that we can throw at, so much in way of resources we can throw at all of these accounts at any one point in time.
Right, I appreciate that, but you are turning them down flat. They're sending you people and they're being turned down.
Could you give me an example or two? I'd be happy to research that.
TLA videos.
I'm sorry, what?
TLA Video. It's a gay company. They always sold videos, and now they sell ebooks.
Right.
And ebookeros.com, and I think it's ebook-eros.com, and that's erotica, and obviously that's a huge market.
That's ebook-eros?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I will research both of those and try to get back to you. I'm sorry, what was your name?
Clea's Press.
Oh, Clea's Press. Okay, great.
Hi.
Yeah.
And you know, we're actually about at the top of your ebook totem pole in terms of sales.
Yeah, no. Trust me, I know you guys.
Right? You know. Okay.
Yeah. No. We know. So I will look into both of those and see where they are in our queue. I'm sorry that they were flatly turned down, but I will take a look at that, and I will get back to at least somebody in your office.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. What other questions are out there?
Two questions that were sent via writing. The first is Nancy Tuminelli. She asks, what are the costs to publishers for programs such as the Sunshine program?
So the cost to publishers would be simply the reduction of the price. So if your digital list price was, let's say, $10, and if you were to reduce it to $2.99, that would be your new list price, all the way down to the $2.99 price point. So that's the cost. And it is substantial, except for the fact that the sales, at least the sales and the promotions that just ran for that small subset of titles, and I must stress, 77 titles, it seems like a decent-sized number, but that is a pretty small number to draw any major conclusions on. There are lots of questions, as I said, there are lots of questions we need to ask ourselves, but the price is substantial, so there's an opportunity cost there, where if you do price it all the way down to $2.99 and you don't make up on the back end, if you don't sell enough to cover your P&L, it could hurt a little bit, but it's a risk we want to take. It's a new marketplace. It is something that I support the idea of taking calculated risks, but it is a risk. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, so Am I being heard?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I've had a lot of issues with pricing ebooks and a lot of confusion about it. Also pricing them internationally, and sounds like what you're suggesting is to lower the price.
Lower the price in certain circumstances and in a potentially a short window of time in an effort to draw sales in with the idea that it would draw social media traffic, it would draw bestseller rankings, it would draw in new consumers that could potentially add new reviews and things like that. So it has a multitude of benefits. There are risks, but there are a multitude of benefits. I would not recommend lowering prices forever. I would say lowering prices for a short window of time. And experiment with your list as such that it would draw in traffic on certain titles so that you could play with that same kind of model in other areas. A perfect example is the freemium model that's been tossed around, where you could take, if you have an author that has several titles in a particular series, you could take maybe let's say there's a 5-book series, and you could take the first book in a series that maybe isn't selling particularly well now, 50 copies a month or something like that. You could lower the price all the way down to 0 for a period of time in an effort to get huge readership on that book with the idea that it would then lead people to the new book that you could price at the full price.
Well, actually, and we're doing that now. We do have a free ebook coming out. I haven't figured out how to price it as free on Helix yet. But we're excited about doing that and driving social media to promote the next book.
Right.
But are you suggesting that we change the pricing in Helix every once in a while?
So again, these are prices that you would have to work out with your digital asset coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be something that would be changed in Helix as well as at the individual retailers. And again, as I mentioned, I would do this in a promotion, just by downpricing it to $2.99 or $1.99 or even $5. You may not get the same kind of traffic if you don't have a promotion tied with it, some sort of marketing or merchandising.
Right.
I hope I answered your question, or at least as much as I possibly can.
Okay.
Agostina?
We have another question that was submitted via writing from Zach Rudin. He asks, what levers have PBG publishers been using to promote discount pricing programs? The Sunshine program had Amazon's levers at their disposal, but discounting those, what has PBG been suggesting?
So as far as the merchandising, when I was referring to levers before, that was actually levers that Amazon had, not necessarily PBG. We gave them these books. They actually promoted them on their own, but we funded, obviously, the price. So this Sunshine program, it was only for a short window of time over the last couple of months. Hopefully they will do it again so we can continue to experiment, but those were merchandising and promotional levers that they used, not PBG. Again, I hope I answered your question.
Actually.
Okay, another question was just submitted from Gary Luke. Could you
Hi,
describe the rights needed to sell a U.S. edition ebook internationally? For example, if the publisher has acquired North American English language rights, but open market as well, could an international ebook be sold?
I believe it can. That's getting into the rights. I'll be very upfront with you, Gary. I know very little about that area, so that is something that I can answer and try to get back to you again. I'm sorry, Gary, what was your last name again? What was the last name, Agostina?
Gary Luke.
Gary Luke. With which publisher?
Sasquatch Books.
Sasquatch, okay. I know Sasquatch well. And it is ebook rights internationally.
I can send you the question in writing via email later and make sure that Gary's in the chain.
Perfect. We'll do so. Sorry, Gary.
Are there any other questions for Greg? Okay. It sounds like in that case that this webinar has come to an end.
Fantastic, guys. Is there any other questions that you think of after you see this presentation or after you see it online? Feel free to ask Agostina or myself, and if we can't answer it ourselves, we'll find the right person to answer it for you.
Yes, sorry, there actually was a last-minute question from Zach.
Oh, sure.
He writes, sorry, let me clarify. I realized these levers were from Amazon. My question was regarding what type of merchandising levers can be used outside of Amazon.
So then I will reference our good friends in social media, the obvious Twitter and Facebook and places like that. I don't believe that for these 77 titles, those things were actually used. It was all purely Amazon driven. But those kinds of things, that's the social media, the social networking that is ever burgeoning that we need to take advantage of, and even more advantage of than we're currently doing today. The merchandising vehicles for ebooks, just the straight merchandising vehicles for ebooks, are there. They're there for your disposal. You can buy them, quote unquote, buy them via co-op on Amazon. Things like previous buyer emails and things of that nature that do have some effect on the sales. And I would talk to your sales department in that area. They'd be more than happy to help you with that.
Zach, were there any other follow-up questions? Nope, he writes, thank you.
Okay, good.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to conclude this webinar. We thank you very much for your attendance and participation today, and that we hope you find the program of value. Please remember that we have recorded this webinar and will make it available on the dashboard within a week or so. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye. That concludes the webinar.